Do you ever get backlash from people when you call them out, when you've shared their stuff?
Oh yeah, all the time. Like there was a time, and it hasn't happened in a while. I think my page has gotten much bigger now, so I think people are aware of how I handle these situations. But you know, there was a time where I was getting like a death threat like every other week. Like there were people who were upset that I was calling out their instructors. The instructors typically aren't the ones that have the issue. The instructors usually are more quiet. But I have like guys like Edon Albanik, who teaches something called Kala. He actually shot a student. He literally shot a student doing disarms with live firearms. And his students are, and he still does this, by the way. There is documentation of him doing this even after he shot a student, still doing disarms with live firearms. So he didn't learn his lesson. And I call this dude out, and all I say are all the facts. I literally say, this guy shot a student. He admits it. I literally tell people, hey, he got kicked off of a firing range for doing illegal things. He admits that. I tell people that he's abusing his students. He admits that. I tell people and when by abuse, he thinks it's hard training. But I mean, when you're taking like a 110-pound woman, you're smacking her around in the face, and then you're expecting her to learn how to defend herself through abuse. That's just not how that works. But then, you also have things like him not showing up to martial arts seminars where he had gotten money ahead of time and then refuses to pay people back, which, by the way, constitutes as fraud. And so you have all these facts that he admits to, and yet his students 100% still back him. So that's how you know it's a cult, is when you show this cognitive dissonance of, hey, look, these are the facts, and then people still defend that. That's a cult.
Isn't it similar to, not to go off topic so much, but is it not slightly similar to the situation that happened earlier this year with the Diego Sanchez's training partner from the School of Self-Awareness?
Yeah, that dude's a turd. Joshua Fabia is definitely a cult, what I would consider a cult leader anyway. He obviously, and just so you know, my definition of what a cult leader would be in these situations is you have martial arts instructors who have high standards, and then you have martial arts instructors who only want what's best for themselves. And that's a cult. When they tell you you can't do this and you can't, for instance, one of the things, like I'm sure that Fabia probably does, but I'm not sure, I can't vouch for this 100%. But when he's hanging Diego Sanchez upside down and he's just punching and kicking him in the head, and there's absolutely no backing medically that is going to help you, then he's just making shit up, and he's only doing it to make himself seem good. Because he could have, he has other students, right? So he could have put other students in the spotlight, but he doesn't. He's always in the spotlight. Or whenever they do interviews, Diego Sanchez will have really well put together thoughts and respectable ways of speaking to people. And then Fabia would interject himself into those conversations and make the conversations about himself. Luckily now, thank God, because I like Diego. I think Diego's fucking awesome. He's a legend in the sport. But at the end of the day, you have to admit that he didn't get his retirement fight specifically because of Joshua Fabia. He didn't get that, get to ride out on his shield like I know he wanted to, because Fabia fucked up the rest of his career. Now, you can't take away from some of the responsibility that Diego has in the situation, which is allowing himself to be taken advantage of by a cult leader. But at the same time, how do we victim blame? Are we going to continue to victim blame here? Because I feel like he's been taken advantage of by a very good cult leader, a very good con man who met him at a time in his life, which is documented, by the way, where Diego was having a really hard time. He was going through a divorce. He was leaving his training camp that he was at, which may or may not also have something to do with Fabia. But Fabia took advantage of that and made him think that the world was against him. The world wasn't against Diego, and it never has been. The world is against Joshua Fabia because he's a 5'2" turd. And so hopefully at the end of the day, he doesn't keep taking advantage of people. But unfortunately, gurus like this will always do that, because they'll be more confident than the victims.
Yeah. That's, I mean, even in the interview with, example of that, the interview that Fabia had later on, I think the day after, after Sanchez have finally cut ties with Fabia, the interview that Fabia did with, is it the guys are from Canada or from Australia? The lady had an Australian accent, but they're from somewhere in North America. the guy I think just completely slagged off and just threw Sanchez under the bus, basically.
Yeah, her name is Helena.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Summer Helene. Sorry, it's Summer Helene. I was actually on her show as well. But when it comes down to like that particular interview, he took every opportunity, like you said, to literally talk shit about Diego the day after they seemed to make a split. It's like, dude, the only reason that dude was even relevant at all was because of Diego. And if you've noticed, now that they've split, you haven't really heard shit about Fabia. It's because Fabia was riding coattails, and that was who he attached his fucking his horse to. And then all of a sudden he was like, you know what? Now that Diego has seen the light, I guess, and got rid of this leech, now Diego has gone on, and, you know, people again are backing Diego. Nobody's talking shit about Diego, and they never really have. Everybody was always talking about Fabia. And I'm glad that he was able to get rid of that dude. So now hopefully he can go on, have maybe a retirement fight if that's what he chooses to do with his life, and be away from somebody who's quite literally a leech. You know, I'd fucking fight Fabia for free.
Yeah, it was quite disgusting. It was quite disgusting what he done with the OnlyFans and stuff that he set up. It was you took advantage of a vulnerable person, and then once the split came, as you said, you started airing their dirty laundry, like the stuff, that personal stuff. You don't do that. No. Like when two people break up in a relationship, they don't, unless it's a toxic relationship, you don't really do that. It just shows what kind of person he is. So is that the type of people, like, do these cult leaders, do they seek out people like this?
Well, I mean, so we did a documentary. We actually finished filming it about fakes, frauds, phonies, and con men and pedophiles in the martial arts industry. And while we were doing the documentary, one of the things that was important to us was to understand the psychology, not only just behind the cult leaders, but the followers, because, you know, obviously some of the things that I post are really outlandish, and they're so far out there that people think they're staged. Unfortunately, they're not. But the thing is that that's how crazy it looks to an outside person. So how would a sane person in their right mind go along with this? And the psychologists really broke it down well. And they said a couple things. One, which was shocking to me, the psychologists, both of them, told us that the people who are most likely to fall victim of cults have three specific things that usually are going for them. The first one is they have expendable income, right? So people who are broke can't afford to pay cult leaders, so they don't join the cult, if that makes sense. They can't afford it. And so these people are well-to-do. And if you look at an example, Wild Wild Country on Netflix, they built an entire town around a cult. We're talking lawyers and doctors and engineers. These are not stupid people, which brings you to the second. The second is most people who fall victim of cults are actually highly educated. You would not think that, but what happens is just like the money thing, right? You'd be like, why would people spend their money on that? Because they have it. But then you talk about people who are well educated. They spent their entire life having a teacher from the time they were a little kid all the way until the time that they're full-grown middle-aged adults. We're talking doctors, lawyers, things like that, right? So they spent their entire life going through school, and then all of a sudden it just stops. That would be very difficult for any of us to do if we had something that we had a passion for. And some people have a true passion for learning and developing themselves. And so what happens is after they get those degrees and after they're done with school, they start working on themselves. They start going to self-help seminars. They start going to business seminars. They start going to gurus to try to develop themselves. And so sometimes you have these gurus that come along in the right moment in your life, and they're looking for people who are vulnerable. We could all, this is a fact, any of us, any one of us could fall victim of a cult. Any of us. It just depends on the right time and the right moment in your life and the right person to come along and fill in that hole that you desperately need filled in that moment. The last of the three, by the way, so far we talked about most people have money, most people are well educated, and then the last one, which is going to be a shocker, people who think that they can't fall victim of cults are most likely to fall victim of cults. And I'll explain that as well. And how it was explained to me was the people who think that they can't fall victim of cults are actually wide open because they think they're smarter than other people who spend their entire life taking advantage of people. And so imagine if you thought you couldn't burn your hand on a hot stove. Well, if you don't think you can burn your hand on a hot stove, you might fuck around with it and start touching it because guess what? You don't think you're going to get burned. You will, but guess what? You didn't think you could. Same thing with people who do really stupid shit, like the people who ignore handrails on like really high areas. They're like, nah, fuck this. I'm going to stand on the other side because there's no way I'm going to fall to my death. And then they fucking do. You know why? Because they didn't think they could. So they're more likely to test those waters because they think that they're above it. The fact is that most people who fall victims of cults are not stupid people. They're not poor. They're just ignorant. They're ignorant to the fact that someone could be smarter than them to take advantage of them. And so when you look at cults and you look at these victims, and that's what I consider them, are victims, it's not that they're stupid people. It's not that they're dumb. These are usually intelligent people. They just happen to have somebody coming along in their life at the right moment of vulnerability to give them and say all the things they need to hear and say at that moment. And then it becomes very easy for them to get washed away and become victims of cults. And then the real tragedy is that how most cults operate is you have a hierarchy. You have the guy in charge, you have the generals underneath him, and then you have all the rest. Well, with the hierarchy, typically what happens is they try to do a few things that are very standard. Isolate you from everyone else in your life, right? Which is very common. But next thing you know, like for instance, in martial arts, for instance, you might start a martial arts class. And then next thing you know, they go, hey, would you like to come assist for our kids' classes? Well, now rather than being there for an hour, hour and a half for your own class, now you're there for an extra 3, maybe even 4 hours. And then next thing you know, they're like, hey, we have this thing going on this weekend. You should come. Hey, this is Steve. You should be introduced to Steve. Now this is your friends. This is your social circle. This is your mentor. And then whenever something crazy comes up, you have to make a decision. Do I get rid of all my friends, all my social interactions, all my mentorship to call this person a fraud, someone who I respect? Or do I keep going down that road and get to keep my friends and keep my social circle, keep my hobby and keep my mentor? So it's not as easy as people think. It's very difficult once someone gets into a cult to get out of
it. I hear everything you're saying, but I'm just thinking about myself and my past life, past experiences. And I think I'd be wise to any tricks that someone tries to use to.
All right, so hold on.
You're gonna get.
I actually, you know what's funny is I promise you I could fool you.
Okay, I've seen you do this. Do you want to go do it?
I promise you I could fool you. All right. So first I'll give you an example of times you've already been fooled. Right. And then I'll give you an example of how easy it is to fool people. So for instance, have you ever been to a grocery store?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, cool. What do you buy? Just curious.
Well, what I need basically, water, milk, bread, some food, or some lunch, or some junk food, whatever it may be.
All right, cool. So you know that is set up a very specific way, right? So I'll ask you: do you ever go down the aisles of a grocery store?
Of course, yes.
Of course, right? Of course you do. Yeah. You do know that those are the things that are most likely bad for you, correct?
Yes.
But you know it's bad for you. You know it's not good for you, but you do it anyway, right?
Yes, you just look, food, the way it is, food and drink. People eat what they like and drink what they want because of the taste.
Exactly. But that's an example. You already know something's bad for you. It's not good for you, and you do it anyway. So here's another example, right? When you go to the checkout line, right? What's usually at the checkout line?
Just where you're paying. Exactly, confectionery and
yeah, there's drinks and there's candy and stuff like that. Have you ever bought any of that?
Rarely ever would I, but okay, for maybe David, but for myself, if there's something I already need, it's something I already gotten from the main core of the store.
Yeah, nothing but as you said, you have before, correct?
Yeah, I have.
So, yeah, exactly. So I have a question. Do you think that was your idea?
No, it's an impulse buy. I work in retail, so I know the setup. I know why it's done.
If you've ever bought anything from that little area, it was because someone smarter than us in marketing realized that when you walk around a store, you're typically hungry, and it's so much easier for you to reach up and grab the soda, grab the candy bar, grab the quick item, and obviously it'd be cheaper inside the store. We think that's our idea. That wasn't our idea to buy those products. That was another person's idea who was smarter than us at marketing, who realized that if you walk around a store buying food and around food, that you might build up a quick tolerance for wanting something quick and easy to get, and then you might pick up something there. So that's just one example. And you might not think that that's true, but marketing is a form of brainwashing. It is. So if you've ever bought anything from that little area, someone smarter than you did that. It wasn't your idea. You think it is, right? But it's not, because if you would have bought that $3 soda right there at the store, you could have gone inside the store and bought the case for the same amount of money and got more. So that would have made way more sense, but someone smarter than us took advantage of us. But I'll try this with you real fast. All right. So let's say hypothetically, you're a martial arts student and you're about to walk into my door. All right. So let's play a little role playing and let's just see how it goes. Okay. So let's talk about a few things up front before we do it. First, martial arts schools do not cold call. We don't. That's not how martial arts schools operate. Martial arts schools don't just randomly start calling people in out of the blue, offering them classes. It never happens that way. So to start, you already have an interest in martial arts. That is your goal because you called us, not the other way around. Second, you made the decision to do whatever it was you were going to do and then come into the class. You didn't have to, but we've already talked on the phone. And if it was me, we probably talked on the phone at least 3 times before you ever walked in my door. But what I want to do is I just want to do a few things real fast. And I want you to come in as if you were a part of my school. This is your first class. Would you be willing to do that?
Ike, do you want to do it or do you want me to do it?
Okay, let me.
All right, cool.
Okay, we'll see. We'll see. Can he get you?
All right. Well, and the thing is like, we'll just have a conversation, but at the same time, just remember the base. The base is I didn't call you. You called me. You came into the school because you're looking for a product, not the other way around. I'm not trying to sell you on anything. You've already been sold. Now you're just trying to sample the product. It's kind of like if you go to like a, let's say like a Sam's Club or one of those bulk buy kind of places, those bulk buy stores, and you walk in, they have those people giving out free samples, right? The selling is you walking up, picking up that free sample. Once you picked it up, you're trying it and now you're eating it. Now, whether or not you buy it or not will all depend on the value of the product to you. But someone convinced you to pick that up. Someone was like, yo, here this is. And even if they just set up the store and set up the kiosk and said, here's free samples, if you walked up, if they didn't set up that store, you wouldn't be picking that food up. So let's go ahead and walk through this real fast. So let's say you're walking into my studio. All right. And we've already established that you're going to be there because if I'm running a school, I'm going to make sure that we've scheduled you. But anyway, let's start. So you walk in the door. Hey, man, how's it going?
Great.
I hope
great.
So.
I'm fine.
What makes you want to come in today?
Well, seeing your self-defense classes, and also I'm someone who in the past had an issue of confidence and defending myself. I want to get into altercations that weren't necessarily altercations that I started. So yeah, I'd like to get some classes and some help on how to properly defend myself in a physical situation.
Yeah, for sure. I can understand that. Have you had any altercations recently?
No, it was a long while ago, but with the way things are now, especially with all this woke culture, you just want to be ready because you just never know.
Yeah, well, you're not wrong. How long have you been thinking about doing something like this?
A long time. It's just gathering the confidence to actually walk in and not feel embarrassed to say what I've just said to you.
Yeah, I can understand that, man. I mean, it's difficult because you're already coming into a situation where it might be a little tense. So I completely get that, and we'll try to make sure you're at ease. I'm assuming you have like the support of your family to do this, right?
Not everyone, but this is something I'd like to do for myself.
All right, cool. So you've made the decision. All right, that's awesome. Now, let's say hypothetically that you enjoy class, right? And this is something you like. Here's our schedule. All right. Most people train about 2 to 3 times a week, but it's completely up to you. What days are you going to be able to come in if this is something you decide you like?
Well, that would depend on the time because I work in the afternoons. So from late afternoon till the mid-evening. So preferably the late evenings or even the mornings or the early afternoons.
Oh, awesome. So around this time would still work for you?
Yes, this time would still be okay.
Okay, cool. Well, here's our schedule. Around how many times a week do you think you'd be able to make it?
Because I'm a beginner, I'd like to really get into it. Probably Monday to Friday.
Damn. All right. I like the commitment. I mean, I'll let you know when you first start, you might want to ease into it. You might be a little sore if this is something new to you, if the exercise is new, but hey, man, that's awesome. I like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of give you a tour of the facility. I'll show you around. I'm going to need you to sign some paperwork as well. So that way you can kind of get a handle on what's going on. Are you coming from home or work, by the way?
Oh, coming from home.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. All right. Well, after this is over, what I want you to do is I just want you to meet me back over here. And then what we're going to do is I'll go over the prices with you. And then I'm going to introduce you to one of the members of the class. So I'll have you fill this out. That'll be your partner for today. And they're going to work with you. So that way you can kind of have an experienced eye kind of helping you out and kind of going at your pace that you're comfortable with. All right.
Okay.
All right, cool. Do you know what I just did?
You just made, well, you told me something, but you also made me feel very somewhat at ease and comfortable. Not so. You took away the anxiety and the nervousness.
So I'll cover it like in detail. The first rule of sales is know, like, trust. Someone has to know you to like you. They have to like you to trust you. They have to trust you to buy anything from you. So if anybody ever does hard sales, it never fucking works. Because what that does is it makes people uncomfortable, and that makes them not like you. And if they don't like you, they don't trust you. If they don't trust you, they're not going to buy anything from you. So having a conversation, one, is important to me because I need to know what your goals are as a good instructor. I also, whenever you fill out your paperwork, which is a minor detail, obviously, because we're on the fly, but when you fill out the paperwork, there's typically a section there as well to talk about any previous injuries that you might have, which is not only important to my insurance company, but it's also important to me as a good instructor to make sure that you don't get injured or hurt or exacerbate an injury. Technically, what we just did, the way that I just did it, my sales percentages are 75%. 75% of the people who walk through the door who do exactly what I just did to you will sign up. Have you noticed you haven't even taken the class yet? So I want to cover a couple things. Let's talk about the 5 whys, or the 5 objections. The 5 objections in sales are very simple. They're this: the 5 objections in sales for gyms and anything physical anyway. I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I have to think about it. I have to talk to my spouse. It's too far away. Most people don't say the word no because it's very confrontational and people hate confrontation. So rather than doing that, they'll give you the same old, hey man, I got to talk to my wife about it and see what she has to say. I got to think about it. It's too far away. They'll say shit like that, right? So why can't you tell me you don't have the time?
Myself, what excuse can I give you? Yeah, like distance. Sometimes I could have other commitments.
Well, you can't tell me, you personally now, when I go to sell you, you cannot tell me you don't have time because you already told me you'd be available during the class times Monday through Friday. So you can no longer use that as an excuse. And it was very casual.
Yeah.
The next thing, why can't you tell me it's too far away?
What if it's
because he went?
Because you just told me you just came from your house.
Yeah, it doesn't make conversation. It doesn't make sense to be around the other side of town, wherever you may be, and just sign up for a class, something like this.
People still do it all the time. That's why you got to get rid of that objection, because that could be one more excuse you can make, right?
Yeah.
You can say, it's a little far away. I was able to make it this one time, but I don't know if I could commit to coming here all the time. Do you have something closer to my house? People say that shit all the time. That's why it's one of the 5 objections. Why can't you tell me you have to think about it?
Well, this one I must know.
Because you told me you've been thinking about it for a very long time.
Yes. Yeah.
Why can't you tell me you have to ask your spouse?
Well, because I've been thinking about this for a long time, and obviously, if it's something that's been masquerading in my mind for all of that time, clearly I must have had this conversation with someone who is intimately close to me.
Exactly. But you also already told me verbatim that you're not doing this for anyone else. You're doing it for yourself. So you don't need to ask permission. Now, the last thing is money. It's always the last thing, right? How do I get rid of the money? Well, first of all, we would have had to set this up before and after and during. So usually how that conversation will go is, like I said, there are no cold calls. So we would have had a conversation before this to set up your trial class. And I also would have called you back to make sure to confirm that you would have been in today. So that means we would have been on the phone at least twice before now. And there's something called pre-framing. Pre-framing is when you discuss pricing with somebody in a casual manner, but you let them know that this will cost you money. So before you come in, what that conversation would be like is, hey, I'm glad you're all set up. Just letting you know, don't forget to bring a change of clothes. So that way you're not all sweaty when you leave. Make sure you're bringing some water. Oh, also make sure you bring a form of payment. So that way you can take advantage of our first day special. And my goal with money is to make it cheaper to sign up today than it will be any other day. And you do this with a lot of other tricks, right? You do this with registration fees that don't exist. For instance, I could say, hey man, normally it's a $200 registration fee. I'll waive that for you today. Normally it's $100 a month. It'll only be $75 if you sign up today. So basically I make it so that way, normally the price would be so much more than whenever you sign up, it's honestly cheaper. Now, statistically, numbers don't lie. If we would have gone through that conversation, you have yet to actually take a class and you're 75% more likely to actually sign up for class. That is how it's done. So when you see people like this and you think you couldn't be taken advantage of, you just actually checked off every one of the lists that I needed statistically to sign you up, and you haven't even taken class yet. So something to think about is that the people who are most likely to fall into a cult are the ones who don't feel they can fall into a cult. Because again, they're not educated in how cults operate and work. It's not just like somebody's a smooth talker. This has already been set up for years and years and years, decades, even hundreds and thousands of years. Anytime someone's been able to talk somebody into doing something that they didn't necessarily think was the thing they really wanted to do, but then all of a sudden they get the idea. They're like, man, this will actually be really good for me. That might not have been your idea. You might think it was your idea, but a good talker will sell you. And so that's what we just did.
That is quite impressive. Because I actually seen you, because you spoke to one of our friends, Emmanuel, at the Prospect podcast, and I seen you do that. That's why I would wanted to see you do it on Ike, because obviously I knew exactly what was coming. But no, it is surprising how, like you said, if you make that call, you're literally giving yourself to someone to be sold. Basically, you're giving it to be sold.
Well, you already made the decision to buy. So like, it's not like anything else, right? For instance, if you go to like a used car place, right? There's thousands of cars on the lot, right? That means there are thousands of different products you could be sold on. And so typically how you would sell a car isn't the same way how you would sell a gym membership, because with a gym membership, you're only selling one product. But when you're selling something like a car, you're selling thousands of products, and there's car lots everywhere, like here, at least here in the States. And so, but with martial arts, I mean, there might only be one jiu-jitsu class in your town. There might be only one judo instructor in your town. So if you're looking for, let's say, judo specifically, like you might talk yourself into it, even if it's a little off, because that's the art that you heard. Or I heard jiu-jitsu was really good for self-defense, and this happens to be the only guy. So I'm so lucky that I get to have that guy. And then it's even easier for that person to take advantage of you then, because he's the only shop on the block and you've heard so many good things from other people. And so it's a very interesting thing in terms of like how the brainwashing works. You don't start off with the no-touch voodoo knockout stuff on your first day. Like what happens is you're indoctrinated over a longer period of time, slowly, before that pops up. Because again, like we said, I need you to have that moment where it's harder for you to go against than it is to go with. And that is established over a long period of time of basically grooming you, getting you to that point where that person, everything that they say, you're like, oh my God, this is the guy, I'm telling you. Kind of like spreading a religion in a way.